Hello, you're watching news from Kazakhstan. I'm Askar Sharif, and here are the headlines. President of Kazakhstan Nursultan Nazarbayev signed a bill on social modernization of the country, giving concrete tasks to the ministries, aiming to make the penalties for provoking labor conflicts more severe. Kazakh opposition members are requesting the National Security Committee to allow them to play the role of negotiators between them and the arrested individuals over the incitement of social hatred charges. Following the example of film director Tursunov, they intend to liberate their associates from the pre-trial detention facility. Glass art exhibition opened in Almaty with works representing different schools and genres. On Tuesday, Zhanaozen City Court resumed the hearing over the criminal case in regard to another former mayor of Zhanaozen, Zhalgas Babakhanov, who is accused of embezzling zhanashir and abuse of office. According to the materials of the investigation, annually from 2005, the oil company and the Social Protection and Support of Population Fund Zhanashir, which is the authorized body of the city administration, have concluded agreements on the provision of sponsorship. Based on this document, the oil company regularly provided substantial amounts of money for the development of social infrastructure of Zhanaozen.
When he was head of the administration, Zhalgas Babakhanov used part of the money allocated from the fund in his discretion. He distributed it to entrepreneurs, bought apartments to the administration staff not in direct need of housing, collected cars and paid for repairs of apartments. According to the prosecution's data, the former mayors of Zhanaozen, Zhalgas Babakhanov and Orak Sarbapeyev, had been embezzling funds transferred to the public foundations Zhanashir and Zharulkhao for many years. The court trial is supposedly open to the public, but neither reporters nor regular citizens can get into the court building, tightly guarded by the police. It seems that the trial is attended only by family of the former administrator. One Zhanaozen resident told the press she was a victim of Babakhanov's activity. At the time, he was literally ruling the city. 10 years ago, she asked the administration to allocate her a small plot of land to start a business. Later, the land was appropriated by Babakhanov's people. Having heard accidentally that her offender is on trial, the woman could not stay aside and decided to take part in the process. She, however, was given the floor. Moreover, in the evening of the same day, her family were visited by 4 young men making threats. I have a lot of relatives here and in other cities, and they all call each other and ask what I'm doing here. This is how I found out that some young people came to my sister and demanded to keep me silent. Another cousin said she was also afraid and tried to straighten me out, asking me to be quiet, as otherwise these people can do something bad to my son. I have many incriminating documents on hands. You're asking me to show them, but I can't. I can't even talk about them. Babakhanov is on trial, and he should either get life or a chair. This is what the entire city thinks, including myself, because he had embezzled millions and everything in the city belongs to him. He owns 8 companies. How can one man get them all working? He came here with just a shirt he was wearing. He worked as a chief of the district construction department, sitting there doing nothing while other people were working for him. He was doing nothing here until he became a director of the city utility company. They bankrupted the old utility company on purpose and created their own enterprise. Between 1996 and 2000, we were not paid any salaries at all. They didn't give us money even for funerals. We went there and had to fight because people needed money, some for funerals, some to pay for children's education. You can't even imagine all the fights and the fuss we went through.
Mangistau District Court released Bolat Amanyazov and Bolat Zeilov from the courtroom on Tuesday. Both Shetpe residents were detained on the eve of the celebration of Astana birthday and were on the wanted list over the case of December riots.
Police reported the youth sports school coach and the Karajan bus oil worker fired for participation in the strike were on the run and perhaps even crossed the border. However, the families of the 2 men say they both were staying in Shetpe all this time. Meanwhile, the investigators' charges do not mention responsibility for flight or sheltering fugitives. According to attorney Mukhtar Alibeyev, who represents Amanyazov and Zeilov, the investigation has initially forwarded 3 charges against his clients, but was able to prove only their participation in mass disorders. The men were pardoned on Tuesday. They don't even deny that they were at the station that day. In their responses, my clients state that they were together with the people. They came to see what was going on, then went home long before the unrest started. As for them fleeing the town, the men explained that when the mass hysteria with the arrests started, they just got scared and temporarily stayed with relatives, all while knowing they're not guilty of anything. Later, they voluntarily surrendered to the police.
туыстарың үйінде.
Public activists and politicians sent a letter to the head of the National Security Committee, Nurtay Bakayev, requesting an access to the Aktau pre-detention facility. Following the example of film director Yermek Tursunov, they want to conduct negotiations with the detainees charged for incitement of social hatred and overthrow of the constitutional system. Further, they plan to file a petition to transfer the detainees from suspects into witnesses.
We are not worse than filmmaker Yermek Tursunov, said on Tuesday members of Kazakhstan opposition. At a press conference in Almaty, they reported about sending an appeal to the head of the NSC, Nurtay Bakayev, asking to visit Serik Sapargali, Akhjanat Aminov, Vladimir Kozlov, and Jambolat Mamay, all awaiting trial in the Aktau temporary detention facility on charges of inciting social hatred and calling for the overthrow of the constitutional system. After all, stage director Bolat Atabayev was released recently. His associates should be given the same opportunity, say activists. The four of us here agree to represent these people on the same conditions granted to Tursunov. Along with the communist Aldamzharov, the veteran of national politics Erik Bolsin Abdildin, social democrat Pyotr Svoik, and public activist Jasaral Kouanashalin all volunteered to visit the prison in the west of the country. Jasaral Kouanashalin is ready to negotiate with the security forces on behalf of Zholtoksan participant Serik Sapargali. He's been in custody for 6 months already. We demand for the restraint measure to be changed to his own recognizance in Almaty, and we guarantee that he will comply with the terms of this restraint. Otherwise, we will have to travel to Aktau with all the applicable consequences, following the example of Yermek Tursunov. Social Democrat Pyotr Svoik admits that the move of the filmmaker Yermek Tursunov, who helped to release stage director Bolat Atabayev, created a precedent, causing controversy among the opposition along the way. He believes that it is very unlikely that the authorities will make similar concessions in regard to the rest of the people involved in the upcoming trial. Svoik recalls how 10 years ago the civil society appealed to various senior officials and international agencies looking for support of politicians Galamjan Zakiyanov and Mukhtar Ablazov. I've met with the leadership of the NSC in regards to Galamjan Zakiyanov. I also met with all top officials of the country concerning the granting of pardon to both convicted leaders of the Democratic Choice of Kazakhstan party, and we discussed the standing committee as well. This wasn't efficient, but still necessary to advance further. We need to help release all of the arrested men. For starters, all defendants should be given a status of witnesses in order to help close the case. All four activists are convinced that the high-profile release of stage director Atabayev was preceded by backroom negotiations with the security forces where each party made compromises. According to Serik Bolsin Abdildin, they won't be able to avoid bargaining this time around. Perhaps the prisoners may have to pay the price of their political ambitions and civic engagement for their freedom. I'm ready to persuade Kozlov and Sapargali not to run for president at the elections. Individual arrests are aimed to threat a generation. Mamay is a young man, and he did not claim the presidency. But the system still warned him and the entire social stratum. I believe the warning was also meant for the trade union activists not to show any initiative. Opposition spokesman made it clear that their activity is a form of help for the NSC. The investigation clearly reached an impasse. Should the negotiation of the witness status for the defendants be successful, it will help the country to avoid the dubious trial and fix the undermined reputation, included volunteers.
National Assembly is proposed to be held in Kazakhstan. Public activists from Astana are calling political parties and NGOs to join their efforts. This way, activists plan to demand from the authorities the right for political participation.
Public activists proposed to call a meeting in September regarding a referendum initiation. According to law, at least 2,000 people must attend it, and if the authorities give the go-ahead after the meeting, the organizers will need to collect 200,000 signatures. Zauresh Batalova is certain that the country needs it, because there were no referendums held in Kazakhstan initiated by civil society. The ex-senator recalls that the first referendum was related to the adoption of the 1995 constitution, and the second was to extend the presidential term of service. Now the time has come to address other issues. A referendum is needed to make the authorities constitutionally address society's problems and to constitutionally make the government recognize our rights to participate in government affairs and give us the possibility to exercise those rights by means of a referendum. Astana residents' proposal came at a time when the idea of a national assembly was already developed. The dialogue was suggested by Almaty associates from the opposition, and it was recently discussed in Astana, where critical comments came to surface. Local activists complained explain that the decisions taken by the National Assembly have no force, whereas the authorities will have to respect the referendum outcome. The organizers keep it secret what exactly Kazakhstan citizens will be asked at a referendum, but promise to put at least 30 questions on the agenda. The first of them is about bringing the political system in compliance with the parliamentary republic standards, and the second is about a fair and unbiased trial in relation to Zhanaozen events. I believe the National Fund should be turned over to Parliament. The next question is city administration elections. At a recent National Assembly, the idea of city administration elections was not approved, so the issue should end up on the referendum agenda. Yerlan Sadikov, the initiator of a previous referendum that was supposed to take place in December 2010, was skeptical about the new initiative. He collected over 5 million signatures in support of extending the president's term. At that time, the nation's leader rejected the idea and decided to hold advance election. Sadikov, a little-known professor, soon was appointed as the president of Gumilyov Eurasian National University, one of the top education institutions of the country. Today, the author of a referendum that never took place is certain that the country is doing just fine. First of all, no one knows this NGO. People are unfamiliar with these names. Currently, I do not see any problems in Kazakhstan that require the involvement of all citizens in a referendum in order to solve them. Yerlan Sadikov says that most of the issues can be successfully resolved by political parties, as it happens in Europe. For some reason, though, he does not add that popular votes are also a pretty common thing in European countries. Switzerland alone holds up to 500 referendums yearly.
The article of President Nazarbayev was published on Tuesday called Social Modernization of Kazakhstan 20 Steps to the Society of Universal Labor. In the article, which was published by Kazakhstanskaya Pravda, the head of state gives concrete tasks to the government and the parliament. Among crucial points of the address, experts note the 6th and the 7th that discuss labor conflicts and enterprises. The head of state writes that they emerge when workers are not involved in the management of the enterprise. Moreover, extrajudicial methods of settling the labor conflicts are not quite developed. Often the staff is provoked by intentional diminishing of labor conditions, disruption of the production, salary payment delays, etc. At the same time, neither the labor nor administrative or criminal codes have articles that specify the responsibility of employers and officials for provoking labor conflicts. Forcing the strike, just like delayed salary payments, is punished by a fine in the amount of 1,020 minimum calculation indexes, while the failure to fulfill obligations of the collective agreement will result in the fine of 200 to 500 MCIs. In fact, employers, including in small and medium-sized businesses, actually provoke labor conflicts. Everyone knows about it, and take, for instance, small and medium-sized businesses that employ people without labor contracts, vacations, etc., and then just fire people for no reason. They fire them with no legal basis and appropriate paperwork. Employees do not understand the significance of these labor contracts, and few of them read and understand the labor code. Therefore, the employer takes advantage of the situation. Although the labor inspectors come and check the employers, they show no results and changes. We do have inspections, but they are worthless. If people continue to accept the fact that some people will keep deciding everything for them and accept all proposed terms of labor, the trade union system will not develop here. Nursultan Nazarbayev expressed interest in journalistic ethics. He instructed the Ministry of Culture and Information to develop an appropriate code. Defenders of the press already fear that the document, which in essence is a professional tool for self-discipline and moral guide for journalists, will become a weapon in the hands of the authorities against the most zealous of the reporters. The code of the rules will be binding. Activists add the idea of such a regulation of the media as indeed the leader of the nation's article itself, in which he wrote about his instruction to the ministry, reeks of Sovietism.
Nursultan Nazarbayev intends to create a list of moral restrictions and taboos for representatives of mass media. In his article published on Tuesday in the pro-government newspaper Kazakhstanskaya Pravda, he instructed the Ministry of Culture and Information to develop a code of ethics for journalists. Moral principles which should guide reporters are not described in the piece. Journalists who have already voiced their concerns say the standards of conduct and ethics are likely to be described in the code, which will be developed very soon, since other documents of the kind are usually created at lightning speed. Honestly, we had a negative reaction to this code. As a rule, it will be a typical bureaucratic document. These kinds of codes should come from down up, not the other way around. Any code of conduct could be used against people it was intended for. Now we are facing what we have been afraid of. It is not the first time ethical standards and rules were attempted to be imposed on local reporters. However, usually the initiative came from within the media community. Various documents created internally by the government did not carry legal obligations, and the violation of any specific standard never led to sanctions. Journalists present in social networks assume the situation will change thanks to Nazarbayev's instruction. How will the new code ordered to be developed by Nazarbayev work? Will the authorities force all mass media to sign it and develop a system of fines? If it is to be approved legislatively, we will have no other choice but to follow it. Otherwise, we will be accused as usual of violating corporate policies. I encountered a few honor codes of different state officials, and I read those fairy tales with interest. I think that their practice is exclusively in the country seen on the state-run TV channel Khabar. According to journalists, the code itself represents a tool for professional self-discipline, which could be used as a punitive measure in the hands of government. In the best case, the failure to comply with the norms of the code will lead to the accusation of unethical behavior or stigmatization, with the worst case coming straight to prosecution. Human rights activists also add that the document initiated by the government, which is already a precedent, may lead to self-censorship in the mass media.
Television and radio will go off the air in Almaty starting July 16th. As reported on Kastele Radio Company's website, the temporary absence of TV channels is related to the introduction of digital television.
Maintenance works should be carried out between the 16th and the 22nd. We've sent an official letter to Kastele Radio saying that they have to make all the necessary technical procedures within the indicated period. It was reported earlier that 14 TV channels and 12 radio stations were going off the air starting Tuesday, July 10th. However, due to technical issues, the maintenance was postponed until next week. The head of the broadcast transmitting station, kplustv, Sergei Zadneprovsky, told Tengri News agency that the date of the maintenance works have been postponed for the third time.
On Tuesday, the Russian version of the internet project Wikipedia stopped work for a day in protest. The popular encyclopedia community is on strike against the bill on protection of children from information harmful to their health and development, which is under consideration at the Russian Duma. Instead of articles in the free encyclopedia, users are treated with a box with the electronic version of the appeal. The adoption of such amendments to the law on information can lead to the creation of extrajudicial censorship of the internet in Russian, including the shutdown of Wikipedia. Activists who support the amendments claim they're aimed solely against the content like child pornography and other similar things, but following provisions and wording used in the discussion will only lead to the creation of a Russian version of the Great Chinese Internet Curtain. In their turn, Russian lawmakers say that perhaps the bill should undergo further development, although there is no overall threat of censorship. At the same time, once adopted, the law will allow filtering websites per blacklist system and blocking any suspicious resources. The bill itself will be discussed tomorrow in the State Duma. This will be the second reading, and upon the third one, the MPs will adopt the bill. This will be the first step towards internet censorship in Russia, in contrast to Kazakhstan, where it's been actively practiced for a while. In 2010, the authorities of the country blocked the access to several websites, including the world popular blog platform LiveJournal. Meanwhile, another group of interest holders in the capital faces the threat of eviction. This time, bailiffs arrived at the doorsteps of Astana native Henry Park. However, they were in for a surprise. A defense line consisting of 40 people came to the aid of Park, their fellow residents who face similar housing problems.
This is how members of the Movement for Worthy Housing decided to help Henrik Park, as they found themselves in the same boat expecting eviction notices any day now. Park and his family have been living in one of the metropolitan apartment blocks for about 5 years now, and this is their second apartment. However, according to government regulation, one family can own only one apartment. Therefore, Parks will have to give up their second apartment. Upon an hour and a half of verbal exchange with the outraged interest holder, law enforcement officers retreated, promising to return next week. Park, who kept his temper all this time, said he would continue to fight for his home by all known legal means. Local administration allocated our apartment to a third party. In turn, the third party filed a lawsuit for eviction. The court ruled to evict us without providing any living space.
Interest holders of the Favort residential complex in Almaty picketed in front of the unfinished building where they were supposed to move in. They've been waiting for their apartments since 2008, however, they were made clear that they will not be seeing a single square meter of their property.
The shareholder agreement was made in 2006, and the money was paid immediately. In 2008, construction was frozen due to the crisis. The construction company went bankrupt and sold the land plot to another enterprise. The new owners stopped the construction shortly as well. It was decided to return the money to the shareholders without any compensations or interests. 36 shareholders withdrew the invested money from the accounts. The construction company has come up with a certain plan. The company cleared the project of the burden represented by shareholders. For instance, the company took $80,000 from a shareholder for 100 square meters of housing, used the money for 6 years, and then sold the building, in which I was planning to live, to a new construction contractor, Falcon Petroleum, for $15 million. However, there are some shareholders who demand to finish the construction and provide them with housing. The money they paid for housing in 2006 cannot buy anything now. The initiative group turned to various authorities numerous times, but the officials have sided with the construction company. Meanwhile, the land plot with the unfinished building has been sold yet again to a third company. The earlier court decision has simply put the sides into a deadlock. We could not terminate the agreement voluntarily, but at the same time we were not made responsible for finishing the construction of the building. This is why we sent shareholders the official notification that we terminate our relationship with them because we still had monetary obligations. We simply put their money into a deposit with the notary.
On Tuesday, shareholders of Karaganda's Valut Transit Bank once again did not get a clear answer as to when their money will finally be returned. More than 39,000 people were awaiting payments for 6 years while the former financial empire's property was being sold all over Kazakhstan. However, people no longer blame only Andrei Belyaev for their troubles, but ask themselves who benefited from the ex-banker's ruin on the division of his property.
I appeal to the government and the state. Why are we completely devoid of rights in our country? Why has this matter been dragging for 6 years now? Where's the money? The real estate is sold, so where's the money? Why are we given promises every day? Whose pocket does this money go to? Do the senior officials respect their people or not? They've been giving us promises on top of promises, and even more promises for 6 years. Look at us, the people standing here. How many more of us were here earlier who are now deceased? 60 people have already died. Dear comrades, we need to be persistent with our demands and not wait for them to promise us outcomes in September, October, or perhaps after New Year's. The investors mostly include pensioners. The bank owes them a total of about $40 million. Aybakir Bilalov, the former head of the financial institution widely known as Andrei Belyaev, has been long put in jail, and now the people's wrath is expressed against those who are selling out the bank's properties. These include kindergartens, hotels, private houses, and business centers. People became outraged after learning that the government working group is still registering unaccounted property, and information regarding investors' issues will be available only in September, following the next working group meeting. Activists threatened to come to the next meeting with mattresses and not to leave the premise of the former Valut Transit Bank until they're given their money back. The Liquidation Commission representatives assured that all the money received from the sale of the bank's properties was transferred to the Kazakhstan's guaranteed deposits. There are too many properties and I cannot list them all. The entire judicial block of the Liquidation Commission is working on the matter. We have established an understanding with the Prosecutor General and the regional prosecutors' offices that are supporting us completely. As of today, everything is in this stage of consideration. The only complication is that loans were given to the affiliated companies.
More than 60 billboards disappeared in Almaty. On Tuesday, at a press conference, lawyers talked about the so-called wild gangs that have cut down advertising structures in the dark and taken them to an unknown destination. A number of advertising companies have already filed 4 claims to Almala and Medeo police departments with a request to investigate the situation and punish the perpetrators. However, security forces do not provide information about how the investigation is conducted and what was found out, even to the applicants. In addition, advertisers are forced to protect the objects themselves.
Самим их ловить, фактически задерживать, то есть вот эту вот какую-нибудь машину.
They should be caught and detained by advertisers. If they see a vehicle that is used to dismantle billboards illegally, it should be surrounded so that those responsible wouldn't get away. Then law enforcement are called to the scene, however the organizers always manage to escape.
Но эти бригады благополучно исчезают.
Advertisers allege that Naida Malyukova, the head of the state enterprise Almaty Zhartnama and a city council member, is behind all the raiding activity. It is believed that the advertising market of the city is redistributed among the gang, and companies working without patrons suffer the most. The heads of advertising enterprises are not in a hurry to restore damaged billboards, as they expect to be raided again soon. Supposedly, there are 300 possible locations on raiders' blacklist.
And finally, works of art made of glass and semi-precious stones were presented today at the Central Exhibition Hall in Almaty. According to the sculptors, this style is only gaining momentum in Kazakhstan.
Stained glass windows and mosaics can be justly regarded as one of the most outstanding monumental arts of antiquity. Experts say that in the past, such windows adorned castles of kings and nobles. In Kazakhstan, the technique became popular only about a decade ago. Sculptor Alexander Shurduk says that together with his wife, he had to learn the craft on his own by trial and error. One of his works is Picasso's Wandering Gymnasts. Shurduk tried to convey the original color palette through the sparkles of semi-precious stones. It is very difficult to pick the right hue, transparency, depth, and natural face color. Here's one of the attempts to convey not only the faces themselves, but also the tall glasses filled with liquid.
This is all we have time for now. Thank you for watching. Stay tuned.